Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Andrew Hoy. I'm a partner at Socium Advisors, and I'm really glad you're here to explore this important topic as we do a deep dive into Social Security and how it works. The reality is many people contribute to Social Security for decades, but don't always have a clear understanding of how to make the most of it. This session is meant to give you insight into the program so you can make better choices when it comes time to elect your benefits. To help walk through this, I'm pleased to be joined by Brooke Baker from John Hancock. Brooke is a practice management specialist based out of Boston and is a regular speaker on a wide variety of retirement planning and financial wellness topics. She also holds the National Social Security Advisor designation, which reflects advanced knowledge in Social Security planning strategies. This gives her a unique perspective that we are excited to tap into for today's topic. Brooke, thanks so much for being with us, and I'll turn it over to you to kick things off.
Thank you, Andrew. Excited to be talking with everyone today. I know I don't look like I'm the age to know much about Social Security, but I unfortunately know way too much about this topic. As Andrew said, I do have my National Social Security Advisor's designation. I've read a few too many books on Social Security as well. So I'm excited to share some of that knowledge with all of you today because I know this program can feel very overwhelming. It is hard to know when you should take benefits, what is available to you. So I'm hoping after I go through this presentation, I can help ease some of those worries and you'll feel more informed. So I'm going to start actually with a history of Social Security. I think it gives a really good perspective of where it was and how it's changed to what it is today. Then I'm going to go into the meat of the presentation, so really understanding and maximizing your benefits and the different options that are available. And then I'm going to end with a couple of the changes that we have seen for 2026. So starting with a brief history of Social Security, Ida Mae Fuller in Ludlow, Vermont, which is actually pretty close to where I grew up, she was the very first recipient of the reoccurring monthly Social Security check. And this first check was in the grand total amount of $22.54. And that might not sound like much, but Ida actually only contributed something like $26 into Social Security in taxes. So she actually had a pretty good payout in month number one from Social Security. And then unusual for that time, but very fortunate for Ida, she actually lived to be 100 years old. So across the time frame of her collecting Social Security, she actually took out $22,888 from Social Security. So she had a pretty good payout for what she paid in taxes, and it might not look the same for all of us here, but we are going to walk through how you can at least maximize what you have available for you. So where Social Security stands today, this has been a topic of conversation for a long time. Social Security appears to be in financial trouble. It's headed towards bankruptcy. I feel like I've been hearing this story for a long time. However, most experts do agree that Social Security will be fixed. How that will happen, up for debate, and we'll have to see what this administration, future administrations, what they decide to do. I'm going to share a few different ways that they have changed Social Security in the past and how they might do it in the future. But the reality is, it is projected that we might run out of money in Social Security by 2035, so in about 9 years. That projection changes every single year that I give this presentation, just depending on what they've changed that year, how many people are still withdrawing on Social Security, how many people have signed up to start their Social Security benefits. So it's always a moving target. But the reason we are headed that way is for a long time, Social Security was actually collecting more in taxes than they were paying out in benefits. So we actually built up a surplus for a long time. And now we are already paying out more in benefits than we're collecting in taxes. So we're starting to draw down on that trust fund. And that's what's projected to run out in about 10 years. So why did we get here and why is this happening? So if we look at Social Security's early years, 1950, average life expectancy was 68 years old. And at that time, full retirement age, which we're going to talk about that more, and I'm sure you've heard that term. So full retirement age at that time was 65 years old. So people were starting Social Security benefits at 65, and average life expectancy was 68. Social Security was only expecting people to draw out of the system for a few years. Fast forward to today, good news for us, we are living a lot longer. But that is bad news for Social Security because they have so many more years that they are paying us out of that bucket, out of that pool of funds. In addition, Social Security used to only be available for retired workers. So if you worked, you paid taxes into the system, you could get a benefit. But we've expanded that over the years to include spouses, to include widows or survivor benefits, disability benefits as well, and family benefits. So even children, in some cases, can get benefits. So there are a lot more people pulling out of the system. And because of that, there are a lot less workers paying into the system per every recipient pulling out of the system. So it used to be a 16-to-1 ratio. Now it's just under a 3-to-1 ratio. So 3 workers paying in per every 1 person pulling out. That's actually projected to drop to a 2-to-1 ratio within the next couple of years. So solutions for this, and some of these things they've already done, others are ideas or things they're trying to implement. Raising the full retirement age, we've already seen that. The full retirement age for a long time was 65. And this isn't a Medicare presentation, but do keep in mind Medicare starts at 65. So it used to be Medicare and Social Security lined up. They both start at 65. Social Security has changed. Now full retirement age, you're going to see for most individuals is between 66 to 67 years old. By the time I retire, who knows where that will be. They can also increase the payroll tax cap. So this affects people that are still working and paying those taxes, paying into the system. So right now, not all income is taxed to Social Security. It is only income up to $184,500. So if you actually earn income above that amount, you are only paying Social Security taxes on that first $184,000 of your income. After that, you're not paying Social Security taxes. So every year they tend to increase this number a little bit. Last year to this year, they increased it by like $8,000, but they could do a larger bump or they could eliminate it completely and just have Social Security tax on all income. So the tax rate on that, what we're actually paying out of our income, is 6.2%. That has been steady for a long time. They haven't changed that since like the late 90s or early 2000s. So I don't see that being a popular solution, but they certainly could create a larger tax rate. They could also include more state and local government employees. So some states already do this, and think of teachers, firefighters, police officers. All of those individuals in certain states actually don't pay into Social Security. So I'm here in Massachusetts. Those individuals actually have a separate state pension that they will pay into, and they do not participate in Social Security taxes at all. So if we included those individuals, then there would be more people paying into the system. And then lastly, they could reduce benefits for higher income earners. I heard a little bit about this recently, actually, so we'll see what happens. But I would say in general, administrations seem keen on just kicking the bucket down the road and hoping future administration will end up fixing this issue. But one thing to note, even though Social Security appears to be in trouble, this is a government program. It's been around now for almost 100 years. So in some sense, it is actually a very large success. This program has been around much longer than most other government programs. And the reason it was put into place is because back in the 1930s, obviously we had the Great Depression. A lot of people were living in poverty, but the community that's 65 and older were very negatively affected by that, and it continued even after the Great Depression. So about 50% of all people over the age of 65 were living in poverty. Today, that number is, I think, less than 10%, maybe even less than 5%. And part of that is due to Social Security. So, Social Security is supposed to be that safety net of providing some level of income to make sure our seniors are not living in poverty. So, this is also a good reminder to let you all know. I'm sure a lot of you know this, especially if you're working with a financial advisor like you are. Social Security was never intended to fully replace your income that you were making pre-retirement. It is supposed to keep you out of poverty. And that was its initial intention. That is what it is still supposed to do. It's just give you some level of safety net so you're not living in poverty, but it's not going to fully replace your income. So the average Social Security benefit this year is just over $2,000 a month, or about $25,000 for the year. So let's jump into the benefits and things that you need to think about. The first question I always get asked is, when should I start my Social Security benefits? Unfortunately, there is no one correct answer. If there was, I would have that answer. Every news source, every TV show, ad you would see would also have that answer, and they would be able to tell you. Unfortunately, there are a lot of different factors that play into when it might be best for you to start your Social Security benefits. I'm going to go through a lot of these in more detail throughout the presentation, but I do want to get you thinking about some of these. So, your need for income. Maybe you got laid off and you decide to start your Social Security benefits earlier. Or maybe you're still working or you have other retirement savings, so you decide to delay starting Social Security and you have that option available to you. Longevity and health in general, the only way we could actually determine the exact time that you would get the highest payout for when to start Social Security is, unfortunately, if we knew exactly the day that you die. Because then we could figure out the calculation, how early should you start for the maximum payout? And I'm going to show you some break-even points to hopefully like fill in this picture for you and get an idea of what that longevity might look like. But again, when you start your Social Security benefits is really going to be an individual choice. And it's going to come down to these factors, and it's going to end up being a little bit of a guessing game. So longevity, a good rule of thumb is the longer your longevity is, the longer you expect to live, the better it is to delay starting your Social Security benefits. However, we can't predict that. So you need to look at your own health, you need to look at your family's longevity as well, and make that decision based off of that information. If you're married, especially if you have a large age difference in your marriage, one strategy individuals will do is if there is a large age gap and the older individual in the marriage is the primary earner, they will try to delay starting Social Security benefits for as long as possible, because when they pass away, they will leave behind a larger benefit for the surviving spouse who will be able to draw on that benefit for a longer period of time. And then lastly, work status. I have a couple of slides specifically on this. This is the only one that you could actually make a mistake on. So we're going to really dive into it in more detail. The rest of them, a little more guessing games. It really does come down to individual choice. My goal of this presentation is to make that choice feel less stressful. If you start a little bit earlier, a little bit later, it doesn't end up making as big of a difference as a lot of people think. So over the next couple of slides, we're going to look at some of those break-even points and what that might look like for you. So I keep mentioning full retirement age. It's not quite so straightforward anymore what full retirement age is. So you have to look at when you were born, and that will give you when your full retirement age is. And then it will show you how much of your benefit you would get if you start early, which as early as you can start is age 62, or as late as age 70. For all the examples moving forward, we are going to assume that your full retirement age is 67 years old, so we can keep it nice, neat, and even. I do like to point out that green bar on the bottom of my slide. Some people feel this social pressure that they have to delay their Social Security benefits or some level of pride in that. But although there is that social pressure, and I think, online, on the news, they always say, delay your Social Security benefits to get a higher payout. A quarter of all individuals actually start their benefits at 62, so as early as possible. And it's under 10% of individuals that actually delay past their full retirement age. So 90% of people have started their Social Security benefits by age 67. If you are in that 10%, that's great. Maybe it makes sense for you to delay, and maybe you want to delay. Maybe you have other means and you don't need to start Social Security. But just know you should not feel the societal pressure to have to delay, because most people are actually not doing that. So what does a payout look like if you start early versus delay? Well, if we look at the middle, let's give the example that your full retirement age is 67. And at that time, your expected payout would be $2,000 per month. If you start early at 62, your payout would be $1,400 a month. And if you delay until age 70, that payout would be $2,480 per month. So if we look at that over a longer time frame, you can actually see what those payouts are on an annual level. So at 62, that payout annually would be $18,000. At 67, it's almost $26,000. And at 70 is $31,000. However, keep in mind, the person that's waiting till age 70, yeah, it's great. They're getting a much larger payout per month and per year. However, they gave up all of these prior years of income, right? They did not get any income for those prior 8 years. So that's where we got to think about the break-even point. Because for some individuals, starting earlier actually makes sense because you're getting more years of payout. So the longer your longevity, the longer you live, the more it makes sense to wait until your full retirement age or later. So you can actually see we gave an example of if you lived until the age of 87, which is past the expected life expectancy. You can see in the green boxes how much you would make if you started at each age. So of course, if you're living till 87, you're going to get a higher payout if you delay your benefits, because you're getting that higher payout for more years. Versus if we showed someone who only lived to the age of 79, they would likely have a higher payout starting earlier. So look at this break-even point. What ages do you actually have to live past for it to make sense to delay your benefits? I'm going to focus only on the blue boxes on the left of the slide. So the way to look at this is if you wait until the age of 67 versus starting at 62, you actually have to live past the age of 77 and a half for it to make sense to delay until your full retirement age. If we look at 62 versus 70, so if you want to delay 8 years, you have to live past the age of 82 for it to have made sense to wait until age 70. And if we look at just waiting from full retirement age until age 70, you'd actually have to live past the age of 84 and a half for it to make sense to wait just those last 3 years. So let's say you're close to your full retirement age and you're stressed and you're like, I just feel like I need to wait a couple more months to start Social Security, or one more year, I'm going to get a higher payout. That difference might be a little smaller than you'd think, and it pushes that break-even point age out pretty far. So it's things to think about. If you have that long life expectancy, it's obviously great to do. But sometimes once you get down to the numbers, it's not as big of a deal as you think. If you're starting a couple months earlier or a year earlier, it's not going to make the biggest difference. So I mentioned there is one mistake that you definitely can make when it comes to starting your Social Security benefits, and that is if you are still working. Okay, so if you've tuned out, this is definitely the time to tune back in. And especially if you are still working, pay attention to this one rule. So Social Security does not like it if you are working and you are taking benefits early. So between 62 to 67 years old. So before your full retirement age. So if we look at the green box, for every $2 in earnings that you have above $24,480, they will withhold $1 in benefits. So if you're working full-time, pretty quickly, you will likely run up on this rule and they will start withholding benefits from you. So not only are you starting your benefits early, which means they're reduced, now Social Security isn't even paying you that benefit because you're still working. So if you're still working and earning above this $24,000 mark, Social Security really wants to encourage you to wait until you stop working or wait until your full retirement age. Because once you reach your full retirement age, if that's 67, at that point, they do not care if you are still earning income or not. Once you turn 67, they say, great, you can make $7 million. We will still pay you the benefit. We just didn't like it when you were between 62 to 67. We wanted to make sure you wait if you're still working. So this is one of the biggest things that I would say to watch out for. Just be cognizant of that. If it doesn't affect you, make sure your loved ones, your friends understand this, because that would be the biggest mistake for starting Social Security early. Okay, so spousal benefits. I'm actually going to show the next slide because I think it illustrates it a little clearer. Spouses can get up to 50% off of the primary earner. And that percentage can get smaller if you start your benefit early. So if a spouse starts as early as 62, they're only going to get 32.5% of that benefit. This example we're using is we're still assuming the primary worker is earning $2,000 a month, which means a spouse can get up to $1,000 off of their record, or as low as $650 off of that record if they start early. For spousal benefits, there's no benefit to delaying. So you'd never have to wait past your full retirement age if you are a spouse. You will start early or at your full retirement age to get that maximum benefit. I'll also add, if you are, so a lot of times what we see nowadays, and a lot of people get a little confused on this, is maybe both people are working. So let's say me and my husband, we both work full-time and we both pay into Social Security. Can either of us get that spousal benefit, or do we just get our own individual benefit? And I would say it depends. It will depend if one of us earns significantly more than the other, and therefore our Social Security benefits are much different. So if, let's say, my husband is the higher earner and his Social Security benefit will be $2,000 per month. However, I've been working part-time, I took time off, and my Social Security benefit is only going to be $500 per month. Social Security is going to look at that and say, well, we're actually going to bump you up to that spousal benefit of the full 50% or $1,000 off of your husband's record. However, if both of us work and earn maybe about the same, both of our expected benefits per month are around $2,000, neither of us are going to get that spousal benefit. We are both just going to get our own individual record. You can only get one Social Security payout. So they are not going to pay you off of your record and your spouse's record. It's just whichever one is higher is what you are going to get. And you do not have to figure that out. You do not have to do the math on if yours is going to be higher or if you collect off of your spouse's. Social Security will do all of that for you when you apply. So when you apply for any benefit that you're eligible for, and they will pay you whatever is highest. They will do all that work for you. So don't worry too much about having to decide if you are taking a spousal benefit or not. They will do that. You just need to be aware of the rules, and we're just trying to make sure you're more comfortable understanding where these numbers are coming from. So for widow and children benefits, I think this is best explained with an analogy. So Let's say that I am married to my husband. We are both in our 40s and we have a 15-year-old son. And unfortunately, my husband has an accident at work and he passes away. Do any of us get benefits today, or do I have to wait until I'm older to get benefits? So actually, today, even though I'm only in my 40s, as a surviving spouse, I can get paid a Social Security benefit. And I can get paid that benefit if I have a child under the age of 16, which I do. We have a son that's 15 years old. So I will get paid out until our son reaches the age of 16, and then my benefits stop. Once I reach the age of 60, I can actually restart those widow benefits and it will look a little bit different. This is the only benefit that can start earlier than that age 62. So it actually starts as early as age 60. So we're going to see that breakdown on the next slide. But let's look at children benefits. We have a 15-year-old son. Can he collect benefits off of his deceased father's record? He actually can until he reaches the age of 18, or they'll let you collect those benefits up to age 19 if you are still in high school. So he will actually be able to collect benefits for a few years. Once he graduates high school, those benefits will be done. He will no longer be able to collect any benefits. So widow benefits work a little bit differently. This slide is only if you're age 60 or older. So widows can actually collect 100% of what the deceased spouse was supposed to get if they were still alive. So you're essentially taking over that benefit. But it will be reduced if you start early. So if you start at age 60, it's going to be reduced more. If you wait till your full retirement age, you'll get the full amount. They do not give any benefit to delaying. So just like the spousal benefits, it only makes sense to wait until your full retirement age. The last category we are going to look at is divorce benefits. This works pretty similarly to spousal benefits. However, they do have some rules in place. So the marriage has to have lasted 10 years or longer. This is a very strict rule. They're going to look at your marriage certificate and your divorce certificate. I have known people that have prolonged their divorce to get past that 10-year mark. So it is stringent. People do think about it when they're getting divorced. Also, if you are trying to collect on the other person, you have to currently be unmarried. Because let's say me and my husband, we get divorced. I'm trying to claim off of his record, but I actually go and get remarried. Well, now I'm not divorced anymore. I'm married. I'm married to somebody else. So I could start collecting off of my new husband's record, but I can't go back and claim off of my ex-husband anymore. So I need to be unmarried. I'm going to show you a breakdown. This works exactly the same as spousal benefits. An ex-spouse can get 50% off of the primary worker's benefit. So it's things to think about as people are working through this. If this doesn't affect you, think about people that you know that this might affect and make sure they are aware that they do have this option available to them. Because when they apply for Social Security benefits, you're going to give your ex-spouse's Social Security number. They'll be able to pull up that information and see what you might be qualified for. And the person you're claiming off of doesn't get notified. So the ex-spouse doesn't actually know you're claiming off of their record. So it's not, hopefully it doesn't open up any drama. They will not know, but you do have to have that information of at least their Social Security number to apply for it. Okay, so something to note. Social Security will actually let you start your benefits and change your mind and withdraw your application. You can do this only once. It has to be within 1 year of starting your benefit. And I do not recommend anybody rely on this strategy because you actually have to pay back all of the benefits that you received up until that point. So it's form SSA-521. And I would say this form makes the most sense for somebody that maybe you're 62 years old and you get laid off from your job and you start your Social Security benefits, 6 months later, you actually get hired at another firm. And now, if we remember, Social Security does not like it if people are working, earning more than that $24,000 amount and taking benefits early. So they might go, oh, shoot, I messed up. I shouldn't have applied for Social Security. They'll say, it's okay. We'll backtrack it. We can cancel it out, but you have to pay us back everything that we paid you. You don't have to pay interest. There's no penalties, but you have to pay back every penny, which can be pretty tough if you've already spent it. So obviously not something great to rely on, but just know that it exists. Okay, so taxes. This is our last more complicated subject. So I know all of you are thinking, what about the big, beautiful bill? I thought there wasn't Social Security taxes anymore. The big, beautiful bill, I'm going to touch on that in a moment. It did not affect the calculation for how much you might owe in Social Security, and it did not wipe out taxes for everyone. So the way Social Security figured out how much of your benefit is going to be taxed, first they looked at how much are you earning. So they would take your adjusted gross income, they would add in non-taxable interest, and they would add in half of your Social Security benefits. So this is figuring out how much did you earn this year? Did you earn $10,000? Did you earn $40,000, etc.? Once you have that number, you put it into this chart. So if you're a single filer, it's on the left, joint is in the middle, and then it shows you how much of your benefit is taxable. So if you're single, making less than $25,000 or joint less than 32, your Social Security benefits were never taxed. But if you're earning above that, you can see up to 50% or up to 85% of your benefit actually could be taxed. So how did the one big beautiful bill affect this? Because I thought Social Security taxes weren't applicable anymore. So the one big beautiful bill actually added an additional deduction that you take on your taxes. So I broke down the different deductions that you will see when you are filing your taxes. So I have a column for if you are single and if you are married. So the first column we have is the standard deduction. When you are filing your taxes, this is when you either take the standard deduction or the you itemize your taxes. So for last year, the standard deduction was $16,100 single or $32,200 joint. Everybody gets that. That is the standard deduction, right? So that already, all of the taxes you were supposed to owe, that reduces that amount right off the bat because you get a deduction. Then there was actually always an additional deduction for people over the age of 65. It was called the senior deduction. And for 2026, that was $2,050 single or $3,300 joint. So that was already a deduction on top if you were over 65. What this administration did was they essentially gave a third deduction that you can take if you're over the age of 65. It's much larger than the prior deduction, and it's 6,000 individual or 12,000 joint. But they did add an income limit onto that, so you can see those phase out amounts. So if you're earning less than 75,000 single or 150 joint, then great, you can take the full deduction. And for all of those individuals, it pretty much eliminates your Social Security taxes. So that's where that's coming from. But if you are a higher income earner, then this deduction you might not get at all, and you will still owe taxes on your Social Security benefits. So I know that's a little bit complicated. Of course, work with an accountant to make sure you're paying the correct amount in taxes. But I hope that clarifies a little bit on where that's coming into play. It wasn't actually produced by Social Security. It was the administration giving an additional deduction, which you do when you file your taxes. So that was federal tax. Now state tax, a little bit simpler. The only states that actually tax Social Security are the ones in green. The ones in blue don't have state tax, so they don't tax Social Security. And the ones in that orange reddish color actually exclude state Social Security taxation. So just the states in green are the ones to look for. You'd of course have to meet with an accountant in your state because each of these states does things a little bit differently. So I do have homework for anyone watching this. I don't care if you are 25 years old or 85 years old. If you have not logged in to ssa.gov, this is your homework assignment to do so. This is the first place that you should be going to understanding your Social Security benefits. This is an example of a statement that you would get. All this information is on the website. It will show you your projected payout if you start early or delay. It also shows you your history of earnings. And this is why, if you're 30 years old, it still makes sense to log on and look at what they are logging for your income. Because every once in a while, I've met two different people that have told me about this. They will actually make a mistake and they will input the incorrect income for the year. And if they underreport your income, that negatively affects your Social Security payout. If they overreport it, it actually helps you. But you do want to make sure that if they have in 2025, you made $5,000 and you're like, I made $50,000 last year. You're going in, you're showing them your taxes that you submitted last year. They should also be able to pull that information. So every once in a while, they might have errors, especially if you are getting to that 65 years old range. They have your income going all the way back to when you got your first job and you were paying Social Security taxes. So I know it can be a little hard to verify, but just making sure there's nothing totally out of the ordinary. So last couple of slides that I have for you are the changes that we saw for 2026. The first one is the COLA adjustment, cost of living adjustment. This year, it was a 2.8% adjustment. So this is looking for inflation. So it increased the average Social Security benefit by $56 per month. You can see what that is historically. We are getting back more towards the average. Really, the average was a little under 2%. But in 2022 and 2023, we obviously saw high inflation. So it was much higher, and we're finally dropping back down. So they do have this adjustment every year. If for some reason there's no inflation or there's disinflation, they will never take away your benefit, but they will just leave it the same. And we actually saw that in 2016. So the last change that we saw was to WEP and GPO. If you have never heard of these programs and you never paid into a government pension, then you do not have to worry about this at all, and you can tune me out. However, if you worked as a state or local government employee, you did not pay into Social Security, and you had a separate pension, these two provisions used to affect you. They have since been eliminated, so they were eliminated effective January of 2024. What these two programs did was they would reduce eligibility for Social Security benefits if you had access to a different government pension. So if you're somebody that was affected by this, it's really important to make sure that you are getting paid the amount that you should be at this point. Now that these provisions no longer affect your benefits, they no longer reduce them. If you also know anybody that's eligible for a government pension, making sure that they look into this. I would say at this point, the government's pretty much fixed all of the benefits. It took them maybe 6 months to really update everything. But it's really important to just double check, make sure you're actually getting that paid that correct amount at this point, because it did affect a lot of individuals. So that is what I have for all of you today. I know it's a lot of information. It can feel overwhelming. I hope I gave you a little bit to think about, maybe ease those worries about starting early versus delaying your benefits. It really is an individual choice. There is no one right answer. And this is why you're working with somebody like Andrew. He can actually look at your specific situation and figure out when that might make sense to you, when you actually need that income in retirement. So Andrew, I'll pass it back over to you to close us out.
All right, thanks, Brooke. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and share your expertise. You're wrapping things up. We hope you now have a better understanding of Social Security, the program, and the decisions you'll be faced with as you are electing your benefits. As Brooke mentioned, as you think through your own situation, Our team is here as a resource if you'd like some help working through how Social Security fits into your overall retirement picture. So I want to thank you again for taking the time to watch, and we hope you have a great rest of the day.